welcome to a storytime video. If you like these story times, like this video. Subscribe if you're not already. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think down below. All of those things really do help out the channel. And if you want to dive deeper into the topic of domestic discipline, get bonus content, a link to our Patreon is down below. Definitely check it out if you're interested. So in this week's story time, I want to talk about how we have restructured our correction system. We talk a lot about our punishment systems here on the channel, and if you go through, I should make a playlist. I definitely need to organize our topics into playlist for you guys. It's something that feels kind of overwhelming at this point because there's so many videos, but it's something that I should do because it's interesting to see the evolution of our punishment systems, of our discipline systems over the years that we've been doing this podcast. And we are always changing because we are always trying to find the best system. And for now, I feel like we have hit a stride where we have found a really good system that works for us. But we've recently restructured our correction system because we were finding that Coda was having to repeat corrections I say a lot. It happened like 3 times, and after the 3rd time, he's like, we need to figure something out here because this is not working. So the last time he had to repeat a correction right before we restructured our punishment system was at the end of the March. It was March 31st, and I had earned a correction, or I had asked for a correction. I asked for a correction, and we went through the process, and I came out of that correction just not submitted to the process. I came out of the correction kind of with a bad attitude and not ready to move on from whatever had happened that day. I can't even remember. And so he basically saw my demeanor, saw my attitude, and was like, we're doing that again. And so he repeated the correction. That was the last time he did that before we sat down and talked, and he basically told me that we need to redo our correction system because this is not working. And because in March we had like 3 days where a correction happened and it had to be repeated. So our corrections back then were 3 minutes, and it was with the acrylic paddle that we use, and basically it was just 1.5 minutes on each side, and it was intense. It wasn't like, it's not that it was light. It wasn't that Coda wasn't spanking efficiently, but it was just too short. And so when we restructured our correction system, we restructured it to now include our loop. We restructured it to where now it's 1 minute on each side with the paddle and then 1 minute on each side with the loop. And when we restructured that, when we talked about it, it kind of made me nervous because even though we were like repeating corrections, it wasn't like, I don't know. It was like, even though when we were repeating corrections, it was 6 minutes, the idea of a standard correction being 4 minutes just kind of felt a little bit nerve-wracking, to be honest. And maybe it's because it also included the loop, and the loop is such an intense implement. Maybe that's what felt nerve-wracking to me. But that has been really, really successful for us. So that last double correction at the end of March, he went through our correction system. At the time it was 3 minutes, and Coda spanks hard, he spanks fast, and so he went through the correction, and I mean, it was a lot. It was very intense, but obviously it was too short because I came out with a terrible attitude. When he repeated that correction on that day, instead of the second correction being hard and fast the way it was every other time, he decided that he was really going to focus on intensity and slow his pace just a little bit. So instead of it being like, basically 2 swats a second, because he spanks so fast, he was spanking basically at like half of that. So it was like 1 swat a second, but he was going so much harder. And because I think he knows that once my skin is warmed up, it takes more to make an impression. And so when he repeated that correction, he was just very intent on making sure that I felt that second correction and that it was effective. And it definitely was, because after a minute and a half of very intense, slightly slower, but very, very intense swats coming at me, I was like completely yielded to that process almost immediately. Of course, he finished out because he needed to, because that's what I needed. Once Coda commits to a process, he's committed to finishing the process. So even if he decided to repeat a correction, if I yielded immediately, he's going to finish out the entire correction. Again, if he commits to a punishment, even if I yield immediately, he's going to finish the entire punishment. And so I knew that when he decided to repeat that correction, it didn't matter what happened at that point. He was going to finish that process. So he goes through, it's so intense, and he finishes the one side, he goes to the other side, finishes that side. It feels, again, just like I immediately regretted my choice to not just accept the first correction. But again, it was too late. By the time I had that regret, by the time I yielded to that process, by the time I knew that I should have just taken my husband's authority seriously the first time, it was way too late. And so he finished, and I was just completely in my submission by the time he was done. I was so apologetic because I did really, really regret not submitting myself to the first correction. But that really did help prompt us to evaluating our correction system. We are very much of the mindset that you don't change things unless they're not working. And so for a long time, that correction system was working for us until it wasn't. And then once it stopped working, we reevaluated and we changed some things. And Coda was able to kind of see some systems that other people were using and started to look at whether or not that would work for us. He decided to try it. It has worked really, really well. In fact, since then, I have not earned quite nearly as many spankings as I did in March. April's been a much better month for me in that regard. And I think it's because our systems are more effective now and have become more of a deterrent, and I am less inclined to earn a spanking knowing what I'm in for. And so they have been more effective. They have been better suited for me and for our relationship. And so we're finding a lot of success in that. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that that gave you some insight into what happens when things stop working and how do we shift to make sure that they continue to work. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. We will talk to you next time. Bye.